Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to be talking you through how to build an Arcane Archer in Baldur's Gate. The Arcane Archer is a fighter subclass that doesn't exist in Baldur's Gate, but exists in tabletop D&D, that allows you to apply spell effects with your arrows. In 5th edition, you're limited to a certain number of spell effects. In earlier editions, you actually could cast spells from the impact point of your arrows. It's a very cool class that's a fan favorite, and I really wanted to bring that flavor, as well as making an extremely powerful archer build, which I think are somewhat difficult to put together in Baldur's Gate, so it's really nice to be able to put that together. In order to get the feel of the spell effects from the Arcane Archer class, we are going to be making extensive use of the magic arrows that you find around the world. Because we can't apply spells with our arrows, but these magic arrows are plentiful, cheap, and actually extremely powerful. And they're especially powerful if you can fire multiple of them in the same round. The reason for this is that many of them have effects that combo together extremely well. For example, while a fire arrow only does plus 2d4 fire damage, I think it is, if you fire a poison gas or grease arrow before that, and then launch a fire arrow at it, you can set off an enormous flaming explosion for a ton of additional damage. There's lots and lots of these combos, but that's sort of the simplest. I'm going to leave a bunch of them as surprises, because I think some of the fun of playing this class is figuring out which arrows combo together extremely well, but I'll mention a couple. Another that I think is extremely cool is if you have 3 attacks in a round, you can fire an ice arrow at an enemy, already a very good action, because if you leave an ice surface underneath an enemy and they fall prone when they try to move, they lose their entire turn. So creating ice or grease surfaces under opponents is an extremely powerful effect that can often be monstrously good crowd control. But it can actually get even cooler if you can shoot multiple arrows in a turn. If you can shoot 3, you can fire an ice arrow, followed by a fire arrow to make a water surface, while also making 2 attacks, and then a lightning arrow for double damage, since the opponent is now standing in a water surface, got wet, and now has vulnerability to lightning damage. There's lots of really cool combos that you can do, and I highly recommend exploring with all of these special arrows to figure out which ones are the most fun and most powerful. However, in order to do that, we need to build an archer that's capable of casting spells and having as many attacks per round as possible. I'm going to show you 2 versions of this build, one of which is built straight up, using no exploits or anything, and one of which is even more powerful, but will use an exploit, so it's possible that it will be patched out of the game later on. I'm using Astarion as the example character, both because I think it fits his personality reasonably well, and also because traditionally Arcane Archers were elves in previous editions of D&D, and he's a high elf, so makes sense to me. At level 1, of course, we need to get access to multiple attacks as soon as possible, and the best way to do that is to begin with Ranger, and take Ranger to level 5 as quickly as we can to get extra attack. We will also be adding in a few other attacks, but something to keep in mind is that the special arrows cannot be fired using bonus action attacks, like you might get from War Cleric, or special additional attacks like we will be getting from Ranger. But of course, extra arrow attacks are extremely powerful regardless, so we're very happy to have them, even if we can't use special arrows with those specific attacks. For our Ranger build, we are going to go with a choice between Ranger Knight, because heavy armor is very powerful, or Bounty Hunter, because Ensnaring Strike, giving you advantage on attacks and preventing enemies from moving, is an extremely powerful effect. We'll also be able to reorder our build later on to gain heavy armor if we want that. And since this is a dexterity-based build, heavy armor is less valuable than it would be for other characters. Since we'll have medium armor and dexterity and shield access, our AC should be excellent, even without heavy armor. So my pick is Bounty Hunter, but both of those are options. For Natural Explorer, you usually want to go Wasteland Wanderer Fire, just because fire is the most prevalent damage type. Also, you'll probably be creating a lot of fire surfaces while flinging your arrows everywhere, so it's probably worth picking this one up. For our stat spread, we're going to do something a little interesting, so let's clear this default stat spread, because it's certainly not what we want. And we are going to obviously get 16 in dexterity because we're an archer, and 16 in constitution because we're a character in the game of Dungeons & Dragons, and we don't want to die. We will also be taking 14 charisma and 12 wisdom. Wisdom, of course, for our ranger spells, and charisma because we're going to be leveling sorcerer later on. This stat spread will serve you very well, and also gets you everything that you need. It will also get you some charisma for dialogue skills, if you happen to want those. For our skill selection, the only really important one, I think, is to make sure you have stealth. It's extremely beneficial for archers, and this build does want to prep for a round before starting combat some of the time, and having the ability to stealth will make that easier. We'll also get access to bonus action stealth if we happen to go Gloomstalker, which I am going to suggest that we do. Alright, so this is my pick for level 1. Let's get leveled up. For our spell selection for Ranger, you probably want Hunter's Mark. At low levels, it's a very valuable bonus action for an extra d6 of damage, and we're going to be doing many attacks per round, so this will actually stay relevant for longer than it normally would, even as a concentration spell. Only in the late game do we get concentration spells that supersede this, so this is pretty good. And then, of course, I like Ensnaring Strike as well, also a concentration spell, but even with the low DC, an extremely powerful effect. Another option is to take Fog Cloud. It acts as a pseudo-darkness ability, and there is an item that we're going to be using to make ourselves immune to this. If you are in a Fog Cloud and invisible to enemies, then you attack with advantage, which of course is extremely powerful, as well as enemies not being able to attack you without disadvantage, and ranged enemies being unable to attack you at all. So those are some options for our picks. I will probably go with these, but it doesn't, it's kind of up to you, and we'll get all three as we level up. For a fighting style, of course, we're taking archery. That's one of the best reasons to be a bow user in the first place, is gaining the archery fighting style and getting a flat +2 to hit, which is an incredible to hit bonus. And at level 3, we are going to take the Gloomstalker Ranger. This gets us an extra attack with Dread Ambusher, because how this works, it doesn't say it in the tooltip, but the attack that deals an additional 1d8 of damage here is an extra attack that you get in the first round of combat. So starting at level 3, you are the only class that can make 2 main hand attacks with no penalty, and in fact with an advantage. Berserker Barbarians can do it. I guess War Clerics can do it, but only a certain number of times a day. So you get an additional attack compared to most other characters, and it's also with additional damage. You also get a +3 bonus to initiative, which is an incredible bonus. Initiative in Baldur's Gate is rolled on a d4, so having a +3 bonus to initiative plus your 3 from dexterity means you'll pretty much always win initiative, since you are going to have more than the total possible roll in bonus, and more than twice the average roll in bonus. You should be very likely to win initiative in every combat. Bonus action Hide is also extremely useful because it will allow you to gain advantage on your attacks. In Umbral Shroud, not incredible, but good. But does have some situational uses. Another option, if you don't like Gloomstalker, is you could take Hunter for Colossus Slayer. Since we'll be making many attacks around, the extra d8 on high health enemies does come up frequently. You can apply this very often, but Gloomstalker is just by far and away the best ranger subclass, and so almost certainly the one you want. I'll take Fog Cloud, although also worth mentioning is every party wants access to Longstrider, and this build uses it better than most because it's an archer build. Mobility is extremely valuable on archers as well. At level 4, we're going to level up our dexterity, although it is worth mentioning that you could, even at this level, take Sharpshooter. You're making multiple attacks in the first round of combat, and so the -10 to hit, and often you're making them with rider effects from your special arrows, and so the -5 to hit becomes only a -3 to hit because you have +2 from your archery fighting style. So it's less of a penalty to you than it is for other characters. As well, you gain an additional 10 damage per attack, and in the opening round of combat, you're making 2 attacks, so you get kind of double the value from this. I think, on the whole, I would err on the side of taking the +2 dexterity at level 4, but depending on how greedy you're feeling, Sharpshooter is a very viable pick as well, and might even be correct. At level 5, we get access to another spell, but most importantly, we get access to extra attack. As well, we get Misty Step, which is really good from being a Gloomstalker Ranger, and that's an incredibly powerful effect on a ranged character, so always happy to see that. But now, with extra attack, we can apply multiple special arrows at a time. The most basic combo here is a poison arrow followed by a fire arrow for a gas explosion, but definitely try out lots of different ones because they're super fun and can give you all sorts of powerful effects. I suggest buying every one of them that you see in a merchant shop, so you always have a lot of options, and then playing around in different combats and seeing which ones you actually end up using and which ones are really fun to use. Something that's also worth picking up here is Spike Growth. It is another concentration skill, but it can prevent enemy melee characters from being able to get to you, and then you can pepper them with arrows while they're slowly making their way across the 40-foot radius, 40-foot diameter Spike Growth. So this is a very valuable spell to have as well. The damage also has no save, nor does the difficult terrain, so it's incredibly powerful, even with only 12 wisdom. At this next level, we are not going to keep leveling Ranger because we want to make more attacks per round. And the best way to do that is going to be to take levels in Sorcerer, which is also where the Arcane part of Arcane Archer comes from, and gain access to Haste at level 3 of Sorcerer. For our subclass, we're going to take Storm Sorcery. It's incredibly powerful, especially for an archer, because it lets you disengage from melee combat without taking an opportunity attack. Extremely strong, of course. And for our cantrip selection, you don't want ones that attack, because you are not going to be using your charisma. You're not going to be raising your charisma high enough for the attacking cantrips to matter. So take utility cantrips. You could take Friends if you are a conversation character. You could take Blade Ward if you want to defend yourself in combat. Minor Illusion and Mage Hand are both extremely strong, so this is probably the selection that I would go with. Or Light is also very good, but the cantrip selection is more or less up to you. Your spell selection, on the other hand, is, I'd say, fairly constrained. You absolutely want Shield, and for your second one, I recommend taking Expeditious Retreat. It is another concentration option, but it does give you another way to disengage from combat at the cost of only a level 1 spell. With this up, you can kite enemies backwards and still make an attack from the full 60-foot range of your bow, which is extremely strong, because then a melee enemy will need to spend their entire turn getting to you. Then you can maybe cast a spell, disengage as a bonus action, and keep walking backwards, because you have the Storm Sorcerer class, so they'll never be able to catch you if you can make your way to 60 feet, or more than 30 feet away from enemies every turn, which is very easy to do if you have Expeditious Retreat up. Sorcerer level 2, we get access to our meta magic feats, and we'll take Distant, but most importantly we'll take Twinned. Since we are going to be casting Haste on ourselves at the beginning of most combats, Twin spell is one of the most valuable points in the game that you can get. Twin Haste is extremely strong, and you will use it extremely well in combat, and then any other character that you cast it on will, of course, use it extremely well. I should also mention at this point, you may want to consider respecking to have the Sorcerer level come before the Ranger level, so that you get Constitution save proficiency. That will stop you from losing concentration on any concentration spells that you have, and is better than the Ranger's natural save proficiencies. So you can definitely do that in order to gain a slight edge if you want to use a respec here. For our spell selection, you just take a utility spell. Something like Enhanced Leap is pretty good. At level 3 Sorcerer spells, or at level 3 Sorcerer, we get access to level 2 spells, and you get to take Darkness, which is the single best defensive tool in the game, rendering you completely immune to enemy ranged attacks, giving enemy melee characters disadvantage. You can stand in the darkness cloud, step out of it to fire your arrows, and then walk back into it to prevent enemy ranged attackers from doing anything to you. Even if they get up close to you, you can walk away from them and the opportunity attacks are made at disadvantage. Darkness is super powerful. And then of course you get Quicken Spell, which will allow you to quicken haste in the first round of combat if you don't get a turn to prep ahead of time, or quicken any other spell that you might be casting. Sorcerer level 4, we get a feat, and we are going to take Sharpshooter here. Since we'll be making a lot of our attacks with advantage, the Sharpshooter penalty is mitigated, and it's so much extra damage because we're going to be making 5 attacks in the opening round of combat, typically. That's an extra 50 damage, so Sharpshooter is extreme value for this character. Take whichever cantrip you want, and at this point your spell selection is, I think, less important. We already have Misty Step, which would be the other really good one, so I might take just another utility spell. Invisibility can be used to get you out of trouble, or Blur is an okay defensive tool, although again it's more concentration, and your concentration is something that you are going to have a lot of uses for. One thing that this character does very well is you have uses for your bonus action, your concentration, your action, and your reaction, all of which are extremely strong, because you have shield, you have quicken spell, you have bonus action attacks, and of course you have a lot of bonus action spells, and you have, of course, your main hand attacks every turn, which are extremely powerful using your actual action. At level 5 Sorcerer, we get access to Haste, which is the whole point of this build, and at this point your typical combat pattern is going to start with pre-casting Haste, and then making 5 attacks on the opening round. 2 from each action, plus 1 from your Dread Ambusher attack. But I think we can do even better than that, so with our next level, we're going to actually take a little turn and jump into Fighter. This gets us the defense fighting style as well, which is always nice. It gets you +1 bonus to armor class. Just a very solid little boost to have at any time. And at level 2 Fighter, we get the best ability in the game, Action Surge. This means that your burst turns, your Nova turns, include 7 attacks, all of which have Sharpshooter, all of which have several of which have bonus damage from various sources, and many of which can be used to trigger special effects with your arrows. Now, you won't be able to use an arrow on your Dread Ambusher special attack, because that isn't an action, and using the arrow requires an action, but it's still very powerful to have 7 attacks, obviously, for an insane amount of burst damage from this character, as well as a number of rider effects. So when we put it all together, we've got decent spell utility, the ability to buff ourselves and at least one ally, and an incredible amount of extra damage coming out from the arrows. Another arrow that I just wanted to quickly mention is this arrow of Arcane Interference. This breaks concentration on, if you hit an enemy with this, it breaks concentration on a spell and silences them for 1 turn, and there's no save on that effect. You just have to hit them with that arrow, which means that you can silence a spellcasting enemy with no save as long as you can land an attack on them. Extremely powerful, of course. This Arrow of Darkness is also very valuable because an item that I highly recommend you have access to on this character is the Eversight Ring, which gives you immunity to blind, which means that you are immune to your own darkness and fog clouds, and can stand in them with impunity, gaining advantage on your attacks and causing your enemies to have disadvantage on their attacks. Also, any gloves, like these Dark Justiciar gauntlets, are very strong because they will apply to every single one of your attacks, which you're making very frequently. Another piece of armor I like a lot is the Sentinel Shield. You can have a bow equipped and still benefit from the AC of a shield. See how our AC went up, even though our bow is still equipped. And the Sentinel Shield gives you +3 bonus to initiative, which, as we've talked about, is massively powerful. So that's some itemization. Alright, so that's the Arcane Archer, but I actually think that we can do even better using a small exploit that is... didn't mean to attack there when I talk to Withers, that is currently present in the game. So let's respec, and we're going to swap some stats around real quick, because the way that the game is currently set up, if you are a wizard learning a spell from a scroll, it uses your total caster level to determine which spells you can learn from a scroll, rather than your wizard level. This is an exploit and is possible to be patched out at some point in the future, although there have been a few patches that haven't addressed it, so who knows? But it's possible that if you're watching this video a long time from now, this may have been changed. But for now, we can get access to haste with only a single level of a casting class, so long as we make our caster level at least 5. So that's going to give us access to a bunch of additional options. We're going to start the same way by taking Ranger, and just make all the same decisions, other than moving our intelligence, moving the charisma points into intelligence points. This version of the build, of course, doesn't get Twin or Quicken, but is going to get more attacks in a round, as well as just higher overall levels. We're, of course, taking Archery, higher overall levels of the tools that you use. We take Gloomstalker Ranger. Just going to speed through this real quick. We take the Dexterity Ability Improvement. Ranger level 5. We are now a 2nd level caster. And at Ranger level 6, we count as having 3 caster levels, because it uses your Ranger level over 2 to calculate your caster level. That means we only need 2 levels in anything else with a caster level to have access to 3rd level spell slots, and thus access to haste. So we will take an additional option here, probably take Wasteland Wanderer Cold. Our additional favored enemy choice, you may want to take Ranger Knight. That gets you heavy armor even in this version of the build, without having to respec. And then we're going to take a level in Cleric with the War Domain subclass, because this lets you 3 times a day make an additional attack as a bonus action. And this is a totally functional main hand attack. So if you're an archer, it's just a whole extra attack that you get 3 times a day as a War Priest. Now you can't use the special arrows with this, but it's still just a bunch of extra attacks in addition to your Gloomstalker attack and your normal attacks from just having extra attack. For our cantrip selection on Cleric, we of course want Guidance, and I liked having Resistance. You can probably pick up Light or something like that. And of course, Bless is already Bless and Healing Word are both very valuable. Though Bless, at this point in the game, you will have better things to concentrate on because you're about to get access to Haste, but these are still just very good spells to have access to. Another option is Create or Destroy Water, because that will combo with any lightning arrows that you fire for double damage on the lightning. And then we take our level in Wizard, which will get us access to 3rd level spell slots, allowing us to learn Haste from a scroll, as well as giving us access to all of the powerful wizard spells that we would have had as a sorcerer, and any other wizard spells that we find and learn from a scroll. So make sure, of course, that you take Shield. I also recommend Fog Cloud. Ice Knife is pretty good, just because it's another way to apply an ice surface, although there are ice arrows that can do that for you. And past that, there's not a lot that you really need to pick. Because we're level 8 and have access to Haste already, this means that we have 6 attacks in our opening round of combat. 1 from Haste, 2 from each Ranger action, or sorry, one from Dread Ambusher, 2 from each action because of Ranger's extra attack, and an additional 1 from War Cleric. For our last 4 levels, I think there's a couple options, but probably the simplest way to do this is just to take 4 levels in Fighter. The reason for this is that then you can also have access to Battlemaster or Champion Fighter. I would suggest Battlemaster. Battlemaster plays extremely well with Sharpshooter, which we will get once we hit 4 levels in Fighter, because it will give you access to Precision Attack. So if we take the Precision Attack maneuver, you get plus 1d8 to your to-hit roll, which combined with your archery weapon style means you're even more likely to hit than most other characters, especially if you're making the attack with advantage from inside a darkness cloud, for example. You also get access to Menacing Attack, which can stop enemies from approaching you. Very powerful on a ranged character because it stops them, Frightened stops them from moving, which is, of course, ridiculous when you are shooting arrows at them. And then finally, I would probably go with Pushing Attack to get them further away from you, although Trip Attack is also very good. There's a few other options here, but Menacing and Precision are the best for an archer. And then at 4th level Fighter, we get our extra feat, which is, of course, Sharpshooter. There's another variant of this build that uses 6 levels of Fighter to get extra attack, but you take the Eldritch Knight Fighter subclass, because that uses your Fighter level over 3 to determine your caster level. So you could take Eldritch Knight 6, Wizard 1, Cleric 1, and then anything else that gives you a caster level. My advice is probably 4 levels in Ranger. That will make you a 6th level caster, so you'll still get access to haste. You'll get multiple fighting styles, as well as 3 feats in that version of the build, although you do lose out on some of the Ranger goodies, but and don't get to take Battlemaster Fighter because you are taking Eldritch Knight, and Battlemaster is very powerful. One thing to keep in mind is that, as far as I know, there is no way to use a Battlemaster maneuver and a special arrow on the same attack unless I'm missing a button for it. So you do have to choose between those 2 things, but it's still incredibly powerful. Alright, my friends, this has been a look at the Arcane Archer. I should also mention there's a version of this build that uses Bard, but I'm going to save that for a future video. I've talked about 3 different versions of the build so far, and so, you know, have to leave the people wanting a little more. I also want to take this moment to say thank you so much to K-Prins for the €20 donation, and Defort for the $5 donation. Really appreciate it, my friends. And as always, if you've enjoyed this video, definitely definitely take the time to hit like, leave a comment, and you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate videos and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.